DC Stipe Miocic went down over the week. UFC 252. DC did not walk out as the champion. He walked out with the torn retina instead.
Sorry, didn't mean to laugh.
Miocic is now the greatest UFC heavyweight fighter in the world. And see how I use that? UFC greatest heavyweight. This will be debated for years to come, decades to come. Who was the greatest heavyweight of all time?
Right.
Some will say Fedor. Some will say Miocic.
Some will say maybe even DC.
For what he has done. However, my debate comes down to the fact that here we are talking about a torn retina with DC, right? And I like how people try to spin that saying, well, if DC didn't get an eye poke,
it would have been a different
fight. But did anybody see the eye poke that he did to Miocic? And it was like the same eye poke, Sean. Like the same amount of finger went into Miocic's eyes, and he was okay. But yet, we're talking about DC's torn retina, his retirement, his farewell walk away. This is where the debate gets interesting, right? Because you talk about DC's legacy. You talk about DC, where he has come from, where he has gone in his career. And to me, if you look at his body of work, Sean, he has losses to John Jones. He has losses to Miocic. Like, you win one, you lose one, you win one, you lose one.
But that's
never really dominated any division. DC is a good fighter. Could be a good champion.
Well, then I guess you could say, like a couple weeks ago, if you checked us out on our other platforms, right, that you would have known that. I guess you could say we talked about Adam Hines-Du. The Adam Hines-Du curse. If you don't know the Adam Hines-Du curse,
in sports, absolutely.
Let me educate you a little bit. Adam Hines-Du was a minor league player in Major League Baseball that played for the Pittsburgh Pirates. And we compare Adam Hines-Du was that if you look at his Major League Baseball numbers, they were meh. But if you look at his minor league numbers, the guy tore it up.
In Triple A.
So we classified him as the Triple AA player. He was always better than his subsequent competition
in Triple
A. But when he got to the big show,
he was never the elite player that he was supposed to be.
But he was about average. Now, that's a little bit of a harsh knock for DC. But DC, when he got to the top of the food chain,
he was so...
There was something a little bit off.
He was inconsistent
when it mattered the most.
In that greatness level.
To me, it was almost as if, like, an interesting comparison, a Donald Cerrone. Donald Cerrone broke underneath the big lights. Now, you look at DC, and DC has had more success under the bright lights, absolutely. But there's a parallel a little bit there.
Absolutely.
That he was always beatable. And how much seriousness did he take into his training regimen? Not to knock him, but again, he did not look like the
traditional DC that we come to. I thought he would have
came in.
Yeah, 100%. I agree with that.
I thought he came in a little bit more fluffier than normal. And to me, like, how much of it was he really fully into this fight against Miocic, knowing he had already checked out?
I was just going to say that, Sean. One thing is that in combat sports world, you have to be all in or you're all out. Anytime that you start having doubt coming into your head and you start thinking about retirement, it ultimately means the end for you.
Yeah.
It means your time is running out. The doubt is creeping in. The time is now to step away. So if he came into that cage, still with that doubt, still with that mindset that you're not 100% involved, you're 100% checked out. I don't care if you're inside that cage and you're doing what you need to do. You're mentally not there.
And we talked about that a couple weeks ago, or about a week ago, was when you come out and you announce retirement, how are you motivated? I mean, you could try to
Sean, we saw Gustafson. Granted, his mind's a little washy at best.
Right.
But he retired, unretired, came back, got destroyed. It happens. You get the itch. Oscar De La Hoya is coming back. He quit on the stool. We are in a very interesting world in combat sports for fighters in general. Because you look at them and you kind of put them on a pedestal as they are big-time athletes in a big-time world making big-time money. But what they do about their legacy or their longevity in the sport is totally different from one to the other.
Yeah.
So when you're looking at DC and you're looking at his body of work, that's what I equate. Body of work, right? The legitimacy of DC is that he's a great fighter. Greatest of all time? No.
No. And I wouldn't even say that Miocic is the greatest of all time yet.
Again,
But Tristan, see, that's the thing that irks me all the time. Why is that everybody, whether it is in this field, Major League Baseball, NFL, NBA, why is everybody so quick to pass the greatest of all time notion? Like let your career officially end and see where your stats, your statistics,
see where you stack up, see where you measure up,
and then start talking about the GOAT.
We were not talking about Michael Jordan about being the greatest of all time, being the GOAT, until his career was done and we saw his accolades, and then he was dubbed simply the greatest of all time. Ric Flair, 16-time world champion. We didn't dub him as the greatest of all time until he was done and was pushed off to the side. Now he's the greatest of all time.
Sting wasn't classified as the icon until his career subsequently started to go away. And
then he's known as Icon Sting because of the body of work will tell you what your career is, not by a fan or by a media personality saying that you are.
And I agree, Justin. MMA needs a criteria check on what is classified as the GOAT. And subsequently, it needs to start with when somebody's career is legitimately over.
Where does he measure up?
Then start that conversation about the GOAT. Like, to me, you can right now say that the GOAT in MMA right now in the UFC, not in MMA, even though you could probably make a case for it, is easily, without a question, GSP. George St. Pierre is one of the greatest of all time.
Okay, and you could double down on that too. John Jones, regardless of what he has done in his career outside of the UFC with his actions for a little over a decade, Sean, this guy has been the most dominant light heavyweight in the history of the game. People might say that he lost that last fight against Dominic Cruz, and that may be. But he was dominant in his time.
But see,
and the fact that
that's another debate for another time, though,
right? Because
of the fact that when you look at if you want to classify John Jones as greatest of all time, you can't. He tarnished his own legacy for multiple USADA breaks.
I'm telling you,
you got to look at body of work based on criteria of non-USADA or even USADA. I guess you could say that, Justin. But you can base the criteria on your stats and what era you were involved in. Because much like Major League Baseball, you still talk about Sammy Sosa as being one of the greatest home run hitters of all time.
Still talk about Mark McGwire
in a steroid era.
The only person you don't think to talk about is Jose Canseco.
But you emphasize steroid era.
Yep.
In any conversation, those two are involved in. So if you want to talk about John Jones in an era, I guess you could maybe somehow incorporate him into into a steroid testing era? Maybe. I mean, it's 50-50. It really is. But it's an interesting debate nonetheless that I don't think it's going to go away anytime in the near future.
Not for fans.
Because you talk about Jon Jones. Jon Jones, to me, overshadowed the fact that DC and Miocic had one hell of a fight. And then we subsequently, at the end of the night, we weren't talking about that. We were talking about that Jon Jones relinquished a title that I swear he relinquished 4 months ago. And then he officially announces he relinquished his... What? And then, oh, wait. I love the media, how they play off the fact that as if we forgot about the fact that Jon Jones already relinquished his title, but yet he tweets it out and officially announces it. Or the fact that...
They had a conversation.
Or the fact that they announced Dominic Reyes versus, I believe it's what is...
Blachowicz.
Blachowicz. They announced that after the first time Jon Jones announced that he was relinquishing his title. But wait, it's now official.
But go ahead. Google it. Google it.
Like, are we seriously trying to make sure that the fans don't remember what is going on? It's like you're taking a page book, Tristan,
out of the WWE.
Wrestling.
Yes.
Let's see how dumb the fans are if they still remember everything that has transpired in the last 2 months. Go ahead. I'll wait.
We knew Jon Jones had contract issues. We know he has issues with Dana White. We know this is still ongoing. Do you honestly think that we're going to see Jon Jones at heavyweight anytime soon? Sean, honestly, I do not see this happening at all. At least not this year. Maybe into early 2021, mid 2021, I think we'll see Jon Jones. But I don't see Jon Jones inside of a cage this year because I don't think the money is where Jon Jones wants it to be. The contract issues that are still there. I don't see Jon Jones, as much as he's saying that he wants to go up to heavyweight. And that's eventually where he's going to land because he's not a light heavyweight anymore. But man, I'm trying to figure out how he's going to put on muscle because he has legs as toothpicks. Explain to me how he's going to throw a leg kick against a guy like Francis Ngannou, who is like 6'4", 250 pounds. And you're right now maybe about 220. And your legs are about as big as my water bottle. How are you going to kick a guy like Francis Ngannou? That is crazy to think about something like that.
And the thing, though, is that like that fight is not going to happen. The fight isn't going to happen between Jon Jones and Francis Ngannou. It's just not going to. Dana White has announced it. That doesn't make any sense. Ngannou is next up against Miocic. Yeah. We're going to see a number 2 against that. Jon Jones is likely to fight maybe the winner of maybe Curtis Blades and Derek Lewis.
That would be interesting.
Maybe there's another fight in there. He really wants Adesanya. I don't see that fight happening. But Tristan, he's put himself in a peculiar situation where it's damned if he does, damned if he doesn't. He's either going to suck up his pride and he's going to do something and he's going to compete, or he's not.
Do you realize that if Jon Jones does show up in heavyweight division, right, and is able to get through guys like Derek Lewis, like a Rosenstruck who beat Dos Anjos, if he could get past guys like Francis Ngannou or big guys like that, then we could be honestly talk about probably one of the greatest fighters in the world. And you, even though he has tarnished his name, Sean, you cannot, regardless. When he steps inside that cage, he is the best, is he not? So it's going to be interesting to see where Jon Jones goes if he could get past the big heavyweights, the big bruisers. Because he will have to put on a lot of muscle mass, a lot of weight.
If he loses to Nagano, it's gonna be by death of a KO. He's gonna be another Nagano meme. That's what's gonna happen.
If he loses to any of the big time heavyweights,
yeah,
it's gonna be interesting for his legacy.
You win legacy tonight.
Yes, because we're talking about a interesting world right now in combat sports because of DC retirement. CPA probably close to retiring. Wouldn't you say, Sean?
Yeah.
Jon Jones, you mentioned GSP, so you're talking about these guys that have a lot on the line ultimately, Sean. If you're talking about changing the division, changing where it's going, you have to talk about that one word. Regardless of what you think is going to happen, Sean.
I guess only time will tell what the true outcome of what happened at 252 and what the future entails with Jon Jones.
Yep.
Because it's cloudy right now. He overshadowed
Cloudy with a chance of meatballs.
Or maybe meatballs. He may get hit with a meatball, just saying. Maybe it'd be a virtual meatball. Who knows?
On an LED screen.
Maybe. But
like the Thunderdome. And we're going to get
But
to
also,
that.
he's like, you want to talk about another overshadowing the situation? DC announces retirement. Anthony Rumble Johnson says, I'm back.
Okay.
When
but
he
see
lost,
how did dominoes fall?
When he lost to DC and retired.
2015 and 2017. DC. Yeah.
So now you look at the transition and it's like, so DC's out of the picture. I'll go ahead and come
Jon
back.
Jones is seamlessly out of the picture.
But still, you may end up seeing a Rumble versus Jon Jones.
Rumble's
at heavyweight.
Rumble's fighting 205. So, again, you talk about the dominoes that fall into this effect, right?
Yeah.
Jon Jones relinquishes the title, moves up to heavyweight. Rumble comes back. DC retires. Dominic gets his title shot. See how everything kind of plays into a part?
Yeah.
It's going to be, I want to see what 2021 is going to look like.
2021 is going to be interesting once we come out of this pandemic